So, today we want to talk about some of the things that God has done in our lives, some of the testimonies that we have. We started our walk of faith back in 2018, the tail end of 2018, and really it started by just wanting to know the truth about things, and we just started by reading the Bible, and that's what started us. And then we started to meet other believers in different things as time went on, but my testimony for why I believe in God, why I believe the God of the Bible is the God of creation and it's the one and only true God, is really, it starts back after my dad had died when I was 9. I had gotten myself into a lot of bad situations because I didn't have a father guiding me anymore, and my mom had actually been working full-time trying to support me and my sister by herself. So they really didn't have much of a mom either, and she became an alcoholic. The stress of losing her husband and just everything, she went down a bad path as well. And so she was either at work or she was drunk, and there was very few times that she was sober and at home. So really, as a child, I did not have any guidance from parents. And at first, I had a lot of fun, and I did whatever I wanted. But as time went on, I realized what kind of a hole I was digging myself into, and how all my horrible decisions were starting to catch up with me, and how they were, I was basically reaping what I sowed. And I had gotten to one of the lowest points in my life. At the time it really felt like rock bottom. I was dealing with depression, anxiety, just hopelessness. And I had just got to one point one day where I literally just broke down in tears at how horrible my life had gotten from my own decisions and my own mistakes. And at this point, I was kind of an atheist. I had been raised as an atheist just because, my parents never pushed that on me, but my father, he was an atheist, and I just basically adopted that because he was my dad, and I just, you know how it is. Kids always want to be like their parents, especially young boys. They really look up to their fathers, and to me, that was what made sense to me, because it made sense to him. And it was actually my uncle who opened up my eyes, which was my father's brother. He opened up my eyes to the idea that there might be a God when I was 12, and after my dad had died and I had visited him and his family. And that was like a little bit of a seed that was planted. But I had a Bible in my room, and going back to where I was, I think I was about 14 when I got into that rock bottom point where I broke down crying, just was at a point of desperation in my life. And I asked God to show me. I remember I had a Bible there with me, and I didn't really know what to believe. So I just asked in prayer that God would show me if he was real, if there really was a God. And I remember longing for family at that time. And I was really just desiring to have a normal family, a mom and a dad, brothers and sisters, just a functioning family and household that functioned like you would imagine a family should. That's what I was desiring. And it wasn't too long after that I got tricked into moving up to Alaska. At the time, I was living in Oregon, but my mom had tricked me into moving up with my uncle in Alaska to straighten me out because she couldn't control me at all. I mean, I just didn't listen to her. She had no way to really enforce anything I did. And so basically my uncle adopted me and became like a father to me. My aunt became like a mother to me. My cousins became like brothers and sisters to me. And it's crazy because I didn't even realize what had happened until years later. I put it together and went, wow, that is exactly what I needed. And I knew I needed it, but most importantly, God knew I needed it. And I think that's the way he revealed himself to me. But I still had doubt. It wasn't, at this time when I had moved in with my uncle, I believed there was a God. But I didn't believe necessarily it was the God of the Bible or anything like that. I didn't know what to believe. But I wasn't an atheist anymore, that's for sure. And when years later, after I had moved out, graduated high school and moved out, and had started my own family, had a wife and kids, I got to another fork in the road. And this time it wasn't so much of a point of desperation as it was a point of frustration. I was frustrated because everywhere I turned to try and find truth, it just felt like all I found was lies. And I didn't know who to trust. I wanted to know the truth about everything. And then particularly religion. Why were there so many religions, and how there obviously can't all be true. And you listen to one person that tells you they've got it all figured out, and another person that says they've got it all figured out, and they completely contradict each other, and you don't know what to believe. How can you can't just pick one. I mean, I don't know, that just, if you really are looking for the truth, I mean, how can you just pick one to believe? I mean, I wasn't convinced by anything that I found. And at this time, when I was really, really digging hard, trying to find answers to life, and just what the truth is, how the world works, what is God, what is religion, what is the way. And there was a Christian ministry that I had come across right at this time. And I didn't even realize, as I was learning from this ministry, that it was actually just everything he was teaching was right out of the Bible. And I didn't even know it. I thought it was just a history lesson on different parts of history. Because there's a lot of history in the Old Testament, and that's where he started, was in the Old Testament. And he worked his way through the entire Bible. I mean, eventually I realized he was following along the Bible, but in the beginning I thought it was just, because the way he went about it, it's not like he just started in Genesis, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. I would have realized right away, but he had a different way he went about it, and so kind of didn't realize it for a while. But so basically, the Bible says faith comes by hearing, and I don't think I ever would have sat down and really gave the Bible a chance without this ministry, because I didn't even realize I was learning from the Bible until I was already pretty far into all the teachings and everything, and it was really just, I say teachings, but it was really just in it was just laying out the Bible. Is all it was doing. It's crazy, but uh, so because of those circumstances, I ended up giving the Bible a chance unknowingly, and as I got through it, and then eventually sat down and started reading it for myself, everything started falling into place. All the answers to my questions on how, even things like evolution and all these things, they just fell into place, and it was no one man that just sat down and taught me everything. It was just, there was a lot of different moving parts at this time in my life, and I really think it was the work of the Holy Spirit, looking back on it, that just had all the right pieces for me laid out to see things from the right perspective, to even believe that the Bible is true. And after this happened, I was a believer, and I never thought that I would be a devout Christian. It didn't start by going to church. There wasn't somebody that came into my house with a Bible and convinced me it was true. This all happened just by a bunch of circumstances that just fell into place perfectly. And that's the most important point about it, because the odds of it happening the way it did seem impossible. And that's another testimony to me that something happened that I can't really fully explain, because if I imagine my past self trying to convince him that the Bible was true and that Jesus is the Messiah and that everything it says is true in there, I don't think I could have convinced myself. I don't think anyone could have. But I think the Holy Spirit did that through all the circumstances that were just perfectly put into place. And then, so we eventually went to a church and we got baptized, and we've never looked back. And then since then, that's when, this is just the beginning, because then there's, for example, I was working a full-time job and had 3 kids, and we were living in a house that was probably, I think it was about 380 square feet. It was very small. And I'm thinking, okay, we're about to have our 4th kid, because my wife is pregnant. I'm thinking, this house is way too small. I need to do an addition or something. So I figured out the cheapest way I could build an addition, and I started buying materials to do it. I had the plan sketched out, how I was going to do the addition, how I was going to build it. Went ahead and bought the first set of materials, started doing the dirt work, and then winter started setting in, and we were in Alaska, so the ground froze, and I'd build fires on the ground when I got home from work, so I could melt the ground, so I could do more dirt work and dig where I needed to. And every week that went by, the ground just got frozen thicker and thicker and thicker. I couldn't even thaw it out with a fire. It just wouldn't thaw out. And I'm getting home late at night from work, getting up early, going to work, and so I had to call it a quits. Sometime in November, the ground was just too thick, frozen. And so I was like, well, I'll pick this back up in, May probably, when the ground's workable again in Alaska. And
our baby was due in June.
I kind of realized, I'm not going to get this house done before the baby arrives. But I was going to try and get it done as soon as possible. Anyways, winter goes along, and when April comes around, I'm like, okay, we're getting pretty close. I'm going to start picking this project back up again. And so I start getting my plans out, kind of getting my mind refreshed on it, getting ready to start doing the dirt work again. And there's a guy who delivers a medication to my house every month at this time. And that's really the only basis I knew him on. He wasn't like a family friend that we knew. We didn't know him for very long at all. Maybe a year, if that. Probably not even a year, if I'm remembering right. Um, we really didn't hardly know this guy. It was just a guy. He was nice. Always said hi to me, my wife, and the kids. So really, the only basis we really knew this guy on was coordinating deliveries of my medication once a month. Just one day when he was delivering my medication, he asked me, "Do you want a house? I've got this house. Do you want it?" And it's like, "What are you talking about? Do I want a house?" And he pulls his phone out and he starts showing me pictures of it, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, "Well, yeah, I mean, I'll take it." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't want to take it to the dump. It's, I want to build a garage for my boat on the foundation, and I've got to move this house off." And this was a very nice, well-built house. I mean, it was 2x6 framing for the walls. It was
more than twice the size of the house that we were living in.
Yeah, it was more than double the size of the house that we were living in, and it was it was just very well built. It was a professionally built house, better than what I was gonna do. I can tell you that is better than what I was gonna do. Had a real attic, everything. It was just, and I mean, but it was a modular home, so you have to like unbolt these two halves. It's kind of like a mobile home, but more like an actual house. Like it actually had 2x6 framed walls, a real attic, not those little thin attics like mobile, but like a real house attic. And I mean, it was a legitimate house. Um, and the guy's like, "Well, I know a guy with a low boy that owes me a favor, and I know a guy with a really big crane that owes me a favor." And this guy that delivers the medication delivery guy, I mean, he had some guy come out and widen our driveway so that they could pull the low boys through there. There's two low boys, each half of the house, on one low boy, one on the other. And then they built this huge pad to for a level spot to put this crane. And this wasn't just like some boom truck construction crane. This was like one of those big, massive cranes you see out in the oil field, or like out like when they're doing like constructing a bridge on a highway. It's like a big, big crane. I don't even know how they got it out there. I mean, they had to get permits and stuff just to move the house and move. I don't know all the details, but I know this crane was huge, and they got everything coordinated. The only thing he asked me to do was to build the foundation. But not only that, I did the foundation. He came out there. He helped me drill the holes. He brought a piece of equipment out there with an auger on it to help me drill the holes for the sonotubes for the foundation. And he asked me, "What day is the concrete truck coming?" And I told him what day it was coming. He came out there and helped me with the concrete. This guy was in his 60s, and he was literally on his hands and knees helping me shovel concrete for the foundation on the day the concrete truck came. And that's hard work. And like I said, we hardly knew this guy. It was unbelievable what was happening. And I look back on that, and it's crazy because this wasn't even something that we prayed for. This was just something that happened. It was a huge blessing. And I look back on it and I go, wow, I'm trying to build this house, buy materials, trying to thaw the ground out, and trying to do what I can. And looking back on it, I really think what had happened is God had looked down on what I was doing and said, "You know what? He's trying, but I'm going to handle this." And I think that's what happened. I believe God stirred that man's heart to give that house to us. And he stirred that man's heart to do all the things that he did for us so that we could have that house. And I'll tell you what, the house that God provided our family was far better than what I was going to build. I'm not a professional builder. I can build a house, but it's not going to be necessarily that nice of one. Anyways, that was a huge. How many people just get given a house? I've never heard of somebody just getting given a house like that by somebody they don't even hardly know on a first name basis. Uh, so that was really, I started thinking, God is there. He is.
He provides.
His hand is at work. Because these are just crazy. This can't be a coincidence. And then, after that, there was a time, and I love to tell this story because it meant a lot to me. And it's really a good testimony. It was something that built faith for me and gave me faith. But when I tell the story to other people, I never feel like I can do the story justice, or that I never feel like whoever I'm telling the story is going to feel the same way about it that I felt about it. And that's probably true, but I'm going to tell it anyways. There was a time that I was just really stupid with money, and I had blown all my money well before I was going to get my paycheck. So it was like my bank account had just a few cents in it, and I was looking at my gas gauge on my vehicle, and I seen that it was almost on E. I was going to run out of gas commuting to and from work before my paycheck came in. I thought, oh, this isn't good. How am I going to get to work? And I kind of figured in my mind by how much gas there was, and like the quarters in my couch and the few cents in my bank account, like how much gas I had, and to get, and I figured that I had 2 days. I could get to work, I could get home from work, and then basically I would be in a pickle because I'd be able to get to work but not home. And so the day where I realized, okay, I'm going to go home, and then I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to have to carpool with somebody or try and see if my neighbor will give me a ride to work. I lived way out in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't anybody from work that could realistically come and get me and pick me up. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I remember thinking in my head, I was thinking, okay, God, if you want me to make it to work, you'll make a way. I had that very specific thought. I just remember it was a thought of just faith. And I just thought, if you want me to make it to work, I'll make it there. If not, I guess I'm not going to make it to work. And I just, that was the thought I had. And I felt very strongly of that. And it was really crazy because as I was getting into my car to go home, and I realized after that I wasn't going to be able to get back home from work the next day, as I walked to the car, I was thinking, all right, here's the moment of truth. Is God going to show me how I can get to work, or am I not going to be able to make it to work? And I grabbed my phone that was sitting in my car, and I looked at it, and my neighbor, who I hardly never talk to, I don't think he ever really messages me. This guy, if we talk, it's usually because I message him, and that's pretty rare, let alone him messaging me. I mean, this was a very weird number to see on my phone. He doesn't get a hold of me much, and I see it, and he says, hey, do you still have that wood stove? It's the middle of winter, and he's needing a wood stove desperately to heat his place. And I thought, whoa, that's it. This guy wants to buy my wood stove. I didn't even think of that. I forgot I had that wood stove. I wouldn't have even thought of selling it. I didn't even know somebody would even want to buy it. And it wasn't really a very nice wood stove, but he asked me how much I wanted for it, and I said, well, how much money do you have? Because he was somebody who was kind of struggling, and I really just wanted to get enough money to get to work and just give him the wood stove. And he said, well, I've got $20. And I said, well, you can have it for $15. So he could keep $5, and he wasn't completely broke. And so he gave me $15, and I gave him the wood stove, and the next day after I got off work, I put gas in the vehicle, and I was good until payday. And it just seems like such a small, petty thing, but like to me it meant so much that God had my back, even on such a small thing. And it was just such a clear thing that was like, there is no doubt in my mind that that was God. That didn't just happen. That was not a coincidence. I didn't ask. I'm not trying to sell anything. This came to me from somebody who never talks to me. And it was something I wouldn't have even thought of. Like, this was God. God did that. And so that's why I love that story. It was just so undeniably God working in my life. And me kind of having a conversation with him, like, what are you going to do? And then he showed me what he was going to do. That's why it meant so much to me. And so,
Should we talk about your hernia?
yeah, that's the next thing. So,
Yeah.
this is really miraculous. I actually had gotten a hernia at work. Just being stupid, picking up something way too heavy that I should have grabbed the forklift to pick it up. Thought I was really strong and could just pick it up and get it done quicker. And I got a hernia. And it was really an unpleasant experience because my whole gut just felt really weird. Like just walking and everything, it felt very sensitive and it's like this is not good. And I started learning about hernias and how basically they don't get better, they just get worse. They just rip more and more and they stretch out even more and the more you lift, the worse they get. The more you work, the worse they get. And they can do surgeries, but those have a lot of issues and usually you need multiple surgeries because the first surgery it'll rip again and then they have to do the surgery again. Or if they put a mesh in, then they have issues with that. And I was just like, oh, this is horrible. My whole ability to provide for my family is based on labor. That's manual labor is really mainly what I do. And I didn't really feel like I had any other options that I knew of to provide. And so I was really scared and I was really, really distraught about this. And one day I went out to the woods and I just was praying a prayer of faith that God would heal this hernia in the name of Jesus, that he would heal it, that I knew he had the power to do it, and that I would use it to glorify him. And he did. I woke up one morning and it was gone. I remember I was laying in bed. I woke up in the morning and I was feeling, I was like, wait a minute. And I got up, was checking it out. I was like, it's gone. It's gone. I mean, hold on. I got to tell you, I went to a doctor first before I went and prayed. I went to a doctor to get the hernia looked at. And the doctor looked at the hernia, told me what kind of hernia it was. I mean, you could feel it. You could see it. It was an obvious hernia. Doctor saw it. They told me what kind of hernia it was. They scheduled me in to see a surgeon. And that was 3 weeks out, that appointment to see the surgeon. And anyways, that's when I went and prayed, was after that doctor's appointment. And so it was really weird because after it was healed, I still had the appointment. So I went to the appointment and showed him that it was gone. He feeled around. He's like, yeah, it's gone. You don't have a hernia. And he told me, I'll never forget this. I'm never going to forget this till the day I die. He told me the odds of that happening was like getting struck by lightning. And I'm just thinking, wow, that is amazing. So God healed my hernia. And I am forever grateful. And to this day, sometimes I feel like a sense of conviction. Like if I'm working and I just picked up something way too heavy from being impatient, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if he'd heal the second time. So I try to learn the lesson, to be more careful and more patient because I don't want to take for granted the fact that I had a hernia and he healed it. And I'm completely hernia free. I've never had an issue since. And I've done a lot of very hard work, lifting heavy things since then and never had an issue. But yeah, like when it's one of those things, that you really got to strain and you're like shaking to pick it up, that's when I kind of like, I probably shouldn't do that. Trying to learn my lesson on that. But that was a huge testimony. And really, there is a lot of testimonies I could go through. Yeah, so after we moved to Missouri, we had a friend. He was a very devout believer in Messiah. And he had a whole bunch of believers come out and help him build this barn that he had bought materials for and had been really struggling to.
All for free.
Yeah, these men all came
out. Getting paid.
Yeah, these men all came out of their own goodwill to help this man build this barn because he had bought all these materials and they were just sitting there getting rained on. And in Missouri, you can't just leave wood out. Just the dew, the humidity, and the rain and all of it just destroys wood very fast. And so his stuff, all his materials, he is not a wealthy man, works very hard. He's got 6 or 7 children, and I mean, it's kind of a big deal that he spent all this money on this to build this barn for his family. And he's not able to kind of coordinate this and put it all together. He's just too. So it was almost like all this stuff was going to go to waste. And, anyways, these whole bunch of men. There was probably, I don't know, probably about 20 men there that all came together to help him build this barn, to help him get it put up, provide the manpower that was needed, the skills, the expertise. There was a lot of men there that knew a lot about construction that were able to kind of take charge and tell some of the other men what they could do to help. And it was just a beautiful thing seeing everybody work together so efficiently and so try to find the right word. Everybody just worked together flawlessly. Nobody was butting heads. Nobody was arguing about how we should do this or how we should do that. And look, I've worked in the oil field. I've done a lot of little construction jobs with people. I've done a lot of work with different men, and I know how these kind of things go. When you get a bunch of people together, and there isn't like a clear guy that's in charge, there's a lot of headbutting that goes on, and arguing, and, you're an idiot, and this is the way this is supposed to be done, and it's just one of those things that it happens a lot. I've seen it. It's kind of inevitable when you're in these situations like this. And I just remember being shocked at how well everybody worked together. It was just like, it was almost like it was a professional crew that had done 100 jobs together already. Just how efficiently everybody worked together and how nobody got in anyone's way. One guy would be going to get this tool and one guy would be going to do that, and everything just, nobody got in anyone's way. Nobody hurt anyone's feelings. It was just, everything worked flawlessly. And it really stuck out to me. I was like, that's crazy. That doesn't usually happen. And I was telling my wife about it after we got done working for the day. And she said, yeah, well, because all the men were working on this barn. Meanwhile, all the wives, they were up at the house preparing lunch for all the men who were working on the barn. And they were just kind of hanging out. But when I told my wife about this, she said they were actually praying that they would work together well and everything. They would get along and they would be able to work smoothly, and that's what they were praying for, and that's what happened. So that was an answered prayer, and I found that was very amazing because it was uncanny how well everyone worked together. Do you want to talk about the dream you had?
Yeah.
About those people we met?
Yeah, so we had just met this couple, and we didn't have any mutual friends with them or anything. We didn't know anything about them. And the day after we had met them, I had a really strange and disturbing dream that he was molesting his daughter. and I want to be really discreet. I don't want to include any details or anything like that, but just basically it had come out not too long after all of that he was actually molesting his daughter, and this dream was crazy to me because it was one of the times where I feel like the father he was doing something so clearly like in my life, and I felt very close with him during this time. Yeah.
And you know, I wasn't really convinced at the time that she told me the dream that it was from God. I just thought, well, it might have seemed like it, but it could have just been a dream. You know, I wasn't convinced. And you didn't actually even want to tell me the dream.
Yeah.
You didn't even want to tell me about it until I had told you about a conversation we had that was really weird. And it was a weird conversation that we had. And after I told you about it, that's when you're like, okay, I got to tell you about this dream.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I just like, okay, you know, it's just a dream. But then it came out that he was doing this. So that was crazy because it was like you had this dream, and then later on we found out that was actually happening. That was definitely a dream from God.
Yeah.
And that was crazy. And so, you know, it might seem like we could just make all this stuff up. We're not making this stuff up. This stuff.
And it's testimonies and assurance, like, to us, too. Like, wow, he is there and he's doing work in our lives, and, yeah.
Yeah, yep.
It's powerful.
It is. Yeah. It is. It really is. It's one of the most encouraging feelings to know that he is there. You can't see him, and a lot of times it's really not obvious. Sometimes it's really obvious. And honestly, that it's so encouraging to just see that. Tell them about the magnesium.
Okay, so what happened to me with the magnesium thing is that I had preeclampsia with my 4th pregnancy and my 5th pregnancy, right? And this happened with
which
David.
One? Oh, yeah. Eden was your 5th pregnancy.
Oh, yeah. So she was a little bit better.
Yeah, so let's use names instead of numbers. Preeclampsia with Joseph, then Eden, and then David.
Yeah.
So the last 3 pregnancies you had preeclampsia with.
Yeah, and so with David, my blood pressure started creeping up, and it felt really hopeless. He was actually my sickest pregnancy too, and I was like half asleep, not necessarily dreaming, but not awake, and I just felt like I heard the Father tell me that I needed to take magnesium and that it would fix the preeclampsia problem. And so
you heard it like a voice, right?
Yeah,
like an audible voice in your head.
Yeah.
To take magnesium.
Yes, and then I was like half asleep, and this was like the middle of the night. But when I woke up in the morning, I remembered what had happened, and I pulled my phone out immediately, and I started researching on it, and I found out that there's a strong correlation to magnesium deficiency and preeclampsia.
And none of the doctors ever tell you that. They just want to give you pills and blood pressure pills and all this stuff. They never tell you to take magnesium.
Yeah.
But the Father did. The Father told her to take magnesium.
Yeah, and so I started taking magnesium, and it basically wasn't an issue after that.
Yeah.
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 My blood pressure
it did. It didn't happen overnight, but as you started taking the magnesium,
yeah.
It got better and better and better, and pretty soon, you basically didn't even have it. By the end of your pregnancy, you did not have preeclampsia. The only thing is, because they had it in the medical notes, you know, like when you go to get seen, in the notes that you were preeclamptic, but your symptoms were gone.
Yeah. Also, you might want to share the dream that happened recently where you were praying, and I had that dream. And
Yes.
That's a good one.
Thank you for reminding me. That is an amazing testimony. Okay. Well, the last testimony that I want to talk about is a dream that you had, which was actually an answered prayer, a very quickly answered prayer that I was praying for. And so one morning before I had to go to work, I went outside and I was praying. And I was just praying that God would show me and Alyssa what He wanted us to do with our lives, just helping with life's decisions, direction and guidance on what we should be focusing on, what we should be doing. And it was just, I was praying for these things, and I was praying that He would show us what He wanted to show us. Not just what we were asking for, what we wanted Him to show us, but what He wanted to show us. And that's what I asked God for. And I went back inside and was finishing up getting ready for work. I went into our bathroom in the master bedroom, and I could see from the bathroom, I could see my wife sleeping on the bed. She was out cold, she had her mouth open, looked like she was drooling. She was out. And I remember looking at her thinking, she could be having a dream right now. Like, as I was looking at her, getting ready for work, I was looking at her thinking, she could be dreaming right now, and it would be fresh in her memory when she woke up, because it's getting close to when she would wake up in the morning. And well, that's exactly what happened, and it's crazy because I remember so vividly thinking that when I looked at her. And so this is the way God works. I mean, when you know God did something, you know. It's not your imagination, you know. And I'm a very skeptical person. I've doubted myself and my own thoughts a lot. I'm skeptical not of just of other people, but I'm skeptical of myself. So for me to say this, I mean, and I know there's other believers out there, they say the same thing. And it just confirms what I've seen as a believer. It's truly, when you see God working in your life, you know. You know, you don't have doubt. And that's exactly what He did, because I was driving over the road at work just a few hours later after I had gotten to work and gotten onto the road. You called me and told me about this crazy vivid dream you had. Yeah. So God showed me what He wanted to show me, and it was actually not exactly what I expected, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear, although it was what I wanted to hear, because it was His will. The dream was showing me the sin that was in my life, that I was ignoring, that I was sweeping under the rug, that I was pretending wasn't there, but deep down I knew it was there. That's what that dream was. So God, that's what He wanted to show me. God wanted to show me the sin that was in my life, that I wasn't letting go of, that I wasn't purging from out of my life. And I felt so convicted. And in fact, that was one of the times where I felt the most fear of God in my life. The Bible says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of God is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. So even though I felt very afraid, it was almost like it was a good thing. I was like, I needed this. I needed this thing. Like, I felt afraid, like I had made Him angry. So that's what the dream was. It was showing me the sin in my life that I had been hiding in my heart and not letting go of, not purging out of my life. And it put the fear of God in me. But anyways, this is just a list of the main testimonies we have of God working in our lives that we can clearly see. Maybe all the people around us don't see it, but we clearly see it. It's not, these things aren't coincidences. God works in mysterious ways, and it's not always obvious to everybody. Well, anyways.
Yeah, that's all we wanted to share today. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.